Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto had an overpowered elder brother born on the Kyuubi night who lived only to protect him? OC times Anko times Kurenai times Tsunade times Shizune times Yugito times Samui times Mabui times Mei times Konan times Karen Ultimate Harem, Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. On the other side are the clan heads. First from the Hokage's chair is Shikaku Nara, Nara clan head and one of the previous members of the Ino-Shika-Cho trio. He had two scars on the right side of his face which were probably his most noticeable feature. He has dark hair tied up into a spiky ponytail, dark eyes as well as a goatee. His ears were also pierced. Like many of the clan heads he was an active shinobi and so wore clothing of that of a shinobi. Shikaku wore a meshed shirt underneath his flak jacket, a deerskin coat over that and hand guards. He has a genius level intelligence, but he's an extremely lazy one, so he tried to get as much sleep when he could. Next was Inoichi Yamanaka, head of the Yamanaka clan and one of the previous members of the Ino-Shika-Cho trio. He was also a valued member of the Torture and Intelligence Division and the Hokage's right-hand man as Shikaku was his left. Inoichi was also a shinobi. He had long ash blonde hair reaching into his back, which he wore spiky on top and ending in a long ponytail, blue-green eyes and strong facial features, which included a well-defined jawline, wearing the standard flak jacket over a black outfit, complete with hand guards, forehead protector and a sleeveless red haori. Then was Choza Akamichi, the final member of the Ino-Shika-Cho trio. He is a tall, plump man with long, spiky red hair and purple markings on his cheeks, wearing a samurai-like outfit which entails a black suit completed with armor that has the kanji for food on it. With the addition of a rope belt, hand guards, and instead of a forehead protector he wears a hachimaki tied around his head, as most chefs do, as one of the things Akamichi were known for was their restaurants. He also wore a pair of silver, hoop earrings. Next came Sume Inuzuka, and currently the only female clan head among the clans, but she was not someone you would want to mess with. She has an animalistic look. She has long, spiky, untamed brown hair, vertical slit-like pupils, elongated canine teeth and nails. She also has the clan fang markings on her cheeks as well as markings over her eyes and a dark shade of purple lipstick. She wears the standard outfit of a Konoha shinobi consisting of flak jacket and a black suit underneath with the sleeves rolled up and bandages around her legs. After her was the more stoic face of Hiyashi Hyuga, Hyuga clan head. He has long, dark brown hair, and featureless white eyes like all members of his clan, who wield the Byakugan. He normally wears very traditional, loose-fitting robes with a long-sleeved, brown haori. Then there was Fugaku Uchiha, clan head of the Uchiha clan and just like Hiyashi rather stoic, his dark brown hair reaching to the base of his neck with the front cut shorter and parted at the front. He wore a simple gray kimono with a white diamond pattern around its neck rim with a pair of gray pants and wooden sandals. And then finally came Shibi Aburame, head of the Aburame clan. Like all members of his clan, has his eyes obscured by dark glasses which feature a single tassel hanging down from one side. He has very spiky short black hair and a mustache, and wears a high-collared outfit. As Hiruzen walked to and took his seat he noticed someone who normally wasn't present for the meetings. Beside Fugaku stood the smaller form of his young daughter Sayaka Uchiha. Her presence confused him for a moment before deciding to let things play out to find out exactly what was going on as he sighed once more before speaking. Alright, what is the reason behind this meeting? At his words one of the civilian council members stood up and Hiruzen frowned seeing her, Mebuki Haruno, one of the more vocal members of the civilian side. Mebuki is a fair-skinned woman with shoulder-length, blonde hair with a single bang, which falls down into her face. She also has green eyes and wears a white kipao dress with 3 red circular designs at the bottom of the front of her dress as well as the back. Underneath the dress, she wears pink 3/4 length pants along with brown sandals. Hokage-sama, It has been reported by concerned citizens that one Kenta Uzumaki assaulted 3 civilian children in a small forest area with a sword. The parents of this children wished to press charges for the assault. Mebuki spoke, her tone respectful but confident. After she had spoken, there were a few whispers going round the civilian side, whispers of demons influencing children and such, but they were quickly silenced when Hiruzen cleared his throat, leaking a small amount of sake, get the attention back to himself. I see. Hiruzen said before sighing to himself while thinking, I thought this might happen. Are there any witnesses to this alleged attack that can verify the events? Hi, Hokage-sama. The 3 boys reported that Sayaka Uchiha was present in the area at the time of the attack, and it was requested that she was brought here to give her statement before the council on events. Mebuki reported as she sat back down. Fugaku looked to his daughter with his usual cold eyes and gestured for her to step out. She bowed respectfully before walking to the center of the room, her emotions in check like she had been taught to do so during official events. Hiruzen smiled down to the girl before speaking gently, Sayaka, can you please inform us on the events of which we are currently discussing, and please don't leave anything out? He asked, giving his best grandfather tone. Uchiha or not, she was still a little girl and this would be a frightening experience for her. Sayaka nodded her head with a small smile before letting it fade as she began to speak. Hi Hokage-sama. I witnessed the events these boys have reported, but what they failed to mention was that it was they themselves who provoked the attack, first by insulting myself and the Uchiha clan. Hearing that, Fugaku's eyes narrowed. He had not been informed of this as his glare leveled on the civilian side as he continued to listen to his daughter testifying. To which Uzumaki-san came to my defense vocally. Then in retaliation the boys insulted his own family, to which Uzumaki-san warned them to stop, but they continued to do so before the first blow was given by Uzumaki-san. The other boys continued to insult him and he quickly put them both down, only using his own fists. It was the oldest boy who first pulled his weapon and injured Uzumaki-san by slashing at his chin after blinding him with dirt. Though he was easily disarmed and knocked to the ground by Uzumaki-san, followed by the third boy who attacked Uzumaki-san with a rock. It was only then did Uzumaki-san draw his sword as a deterrent to any further actions against him before advising the boys to leave. Sayaka finished giving a head bow. This caused some more whispers to go through the room, most questioning how Kenta had such skill at his age and where he'd gotten the sword. Shibi Aburame then asked a question, Uchiha-san, might I inquire as to why you were in that area to begin with? He asked out of minor curiosity. Sayaka paused for a moment, feeling her two sans gaze on her before she spoke. I go there on my day off from study to relax. The riverside is peaceful and I find it a quiet place to gather my thoughts. The boys in question often decide to try and provoke me into disgraceful actions through insults. When that happens, I normally leave. This time I chose to retort, questioning their own strength if they felt that they needed to be in a group just to come and insult myself. They were on the verge of assaulting myself when Uzumaki-san came to my aid. Hiruzen couldn't help but smirk slightly hearing Sayaka explain. Now I see, so this is where Kenta's fascination of the Sharingan came from and why he wanted this day off every week. It's good to see he's found a friend, Hiruzen thought before clearing his throat. It sounds to me that it is the boys who are in the wrong here. They provoked the incident and were blatantly looking for trouble, and it was one of them who drew and used their weapons first and even injured Kenta as well. An injury? I had the chance to inspect less than a few hours ago when he came and reported the incident to me. The injury isn't life-threatening, but will no doubt leave a nasty scar on his face. But Kenta expressed his wish for charges not to be pressed. As such, I recommend the matter is dropped. It was a child's fight that got out of control, nothing more. Fugaku let his scowl drop and closed his eyes before speaking. I second the motion. He spoke out, getting some questioning glances from the other clan heads. Uzumaki-san was acting partially in defense of my daughter and clan, so I will act in defense of him on this matter. He continued before opening his eyes and looking to Hiruzen. Hokage-sama, might I request my thanks for this act be given to Uzumaki-san and my apologies that he was hurt on the matter. Such an outcome was most unfortunate. Hiruzen nodded in acceptance. Very well, I will pass it on the next I see him. He replied, getting a nod from the Uchiha clan head as Sayaka returned to his side. At this point Kaharu from the Elder Council spoke up. Be that as it may, there is still the matter of the sword he possessed, where he got it from and the possibility that it might be stolen. Danzo then chose this time to speak as well. Perhaps, it has also come to my attention from an anonymous source that the boy is being trained in secret for the past 3 months, before he's even in the academy. Hiruzen settled a glare on Danzo as his fists clenched. Anonymous source he has someone watching them, or rather Kenta. What are you plotting, Danzo? Hiruzen thought only to be pulled out of them as Mebuki spoke as well. I was also informed by the librarian that he forced his way into the shinobi library this evening and took scrolls of jutsus and techniques, she said as voices began to circle the room, growing louder. Sayaka meanwhile was listening and wasn't sure what to think of all this. They were talking about someone her age breaking into the library that was for shinobi and guarded by shinobi, and stealing scrolls. Even to her that was ridiculous. She knew firsthand that Kenta has some skill but not enough to pull something like that off. Hiruzen, hearing the final statement, had a scowl on his face which only deepened as the voice grew before he finally decided to silence them as he spoke with a raised voice. Enough, he said as he let out a burst of low sake enough to silence the whole room. These matters are easily answered. 3 months ago Kenta came to me and made a reasonable request for early training before the academy, reasoning that he'd be at a disadvantage from the other children who had parents to get them ready for the academy and that clan children would even receive training by now. Most clan heads were nodding slightly. Most of them had begun training their children for the academy by teaching them clan techniques, as was tradition to give them time to learn them, so to request early training wasn't much to ask, and given his orphan status he wouldn't have anyone to turn to bar the Hokage for such a request. Hiruzen took a breath before continuing. I found his request to be reasonable and assigned him a newly promoted chunin to help him get started and get him ready for the academy. The sword was given to him on my orders to arm him and start him on his training. Today he passed a test I gave him on his skill set, and as a reward I gave him access to the shinobi library to further advance his knowledge, under the supervision of his chunin instructor. There was no theft involved in anything, and I will personally look into any such allegations tomorrow morning, as I believe them to be blatant lies. Hiruzen noticed Danzo was about to speak but cut him off. As Hokage, it was under my digression to grant privileges such as have been given Kenta, as his arguments for them were within reason. Hearing his tone, the civilians decided it wise not to dispute his decision and the clan heads nodded in agreement. Fugaku gave Hiruzen a curious glance which was rare for him. Before speaking, Uzumaki-san sounds like a rather level-headed young man to be able to form such compelling arguments at his age. Hiruzen nodded in agreement. That he is. It's sometimes like talking with an adult with him, though he can still act his age at times. Now if that is all, Hiruzen said as he stood up, this meeting is adjourned and I bid you all good night, he said, and then used the shunshin to get away before another topic could be brought up. He went to bed knowing his clones would pick up the paperwork. Scene break. 6 days later. Hiruzen was sitting in his office with his feet up as he exhaled smoke from his pipe after another day of form filling. Letting out a breath as he relaxed. The past 6 days had been the most relaxing he'd had in the past 10 years as Hokage. Each day his clones had been on paperwork duty and he hadn't had to do anything but make them for the task, before sitting back and relaxing as he enjoyed his free time. He'd actually been able to train for the first time in a long time, and he wasn't pleased with how poor his condition had been. It would take a lot of work to get him back to his former strength, but he had time now to do so with no rush. He was about to bring out his little orange book and relax further when the door knocked, making him sigh. Another time then, he thought before putting the book back into his robes. Come in, he called as the door opened as Kenta walked in with a grin on his face and scroll in his hand. Hiruzen smiled seeing him. Ah Kenta, it's been 6 days so far, how goes the jutsu? Don't be ashamed coming asking for help. If you want we can call off the bet. Hiruzen started to offer but stopped when he saw Kenta's grin growing even more. Actually, Gigi, I've come to tell you something. Kenta started as he raised his hands up into the familiar cross sign, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He called out before he was covered in smoke before revealing three Kenta standing before an astounded Hiruzen. I've got it down already. Hiruzen was astounded looking at Kenta, only 10 years old and to have already got the hang of such a high-level ninjutsu like this. Just what are you capable of, Kenta? Hiruzen thought as two of the Kentas poofed into smoke revealing the original grinning like mad which only served to make Hiruzen chuckle before shaking his head. You never do cease to amaze me, though I suppose I should probably get used to it, my new student. Hiruzen smiled. I haven't had a student for years, it will certainly be nice to relive the experience. Hiruzen though before an old smile came to his face, one that had normally made the Sanin shiver when they were younger. But don't think I'll be going easy on you just because you're young. I'm going to work you into a great shinobi. Kenta grinned back before putting his hands together and bowing. I wouldn't have it any other way, Hokage-sensei. Hiruzen chuckled. Enough of that now, call me Sarutobi, as my new student that is only fitting. Now get on home before it gets dark. Hiruzen said as he gestured to the door with a smile. Kenta nodded with a grin. Hi Sarutobi-sensei. He said as he went for the door but stopped, then Hiruzen called him. Oh Kenta. Kenta turned only to see Hiruzen smiling at him. I'm extremely proud of you. Learning such an advanced jutsu at your age in 6 days is an achievement in itself. Hiruzen said with a proud smile. That was when Kenta grinned even more. Oh, it didn't take me 6 days, I had it done in 2. Kenta said like it was nothing. At that Hiruzen's eyes went wide as he registered what he had just been told. 2 days. He spoke making sure he heard right. Then why did you wait so long before coming to tell me? Kenta chuckled as he rubbed the back of his head, slightly embarrassed. Well, to be truthful, I kind of lost track of time. Once I was able to hold the clones for an hour, I started to really notice their effects of how their experiences and memories come back to me, so I kind of went overboard using them to read as much as I could and practice my chakra control. In the beginning I could only create 5 clones, but by day 2 that was up to 50 and by 3 I had 150. I then had them split into groups and start reading everything they could in the library. The librarian nearly had a heart attack when I used the clones there and we got to work. I think I've read 2 sections already, but there's still so much left. At that moment Hiruzen was doing the fish out of water jutsu, his mouth gaping and his eyes wide at what he was being told. Such a method of training shouldn't have been possible. Well, for normal people that was, normal people with normal chakra reserves. But Kenta, he was beyond the norm. He was an Uzumaki, and if there was one thing they loved to do was break the norm repeatedly. Finally snapping out of his jutsu, Hiruzen chuckled. Kenta, you are truly one of a kind. Learning that jutsu and in the same day discovering its side effect and making it work for you, I should have expected this from you. Originally this technique was meant for spying and recognizance, but to use it as you have isn't something normal people can do due to our reserves, because we could never make enough clones for it to have as great an effect as much as yours can. Kenta grinned. I kind of figured that out too, Gigi. Well, I'll see you the day after tomorrow, Gigi. Be here in 9 sharp and I'll begin your first lessons, and we'll put your clones to work also. Hiruzen said with a smirk. Kenta nodded. Hi Sarutobi-sensei. He said before running out the door, heading home, leaving a smirking Hiruzen in his office who shook his head in disbelief. 2 days for a B-rank ninjutsu like the Kage Bunshin. I may just have my work cut out for me. That boy will make a fine shinobi, Hiruzen thought before looking to the picture of the Yondaime Hokage on the wall. You would be proud, Minato, and I'm sure he will rub off on Naruto shortly. Those two are practically inseparable. In Training Ground 43's training area, Kenta and Anko stood facing off against each other, both smirking at each other as they both stood in their respective taijutsu stances. Anko in a lower stance, legs apart, right foot in front of her left, fists raised slightly with her back arched ready to attack. Across from her, Kenta stood in his stance, right arm raised horizontal in front of him, palm facing down. His left arm was close to his side, palm facing up, his body at an angle. His fists weren't normal, they were closed into fists but only to the second joints, leaving the thickest section of the fingers out straight. his thumbs pulled into the open palm. Both were wearing their normal combat attire as Hiruzen watched them from underneath his sun umbrella shade, a small smile on his face as he watched yet another spar between the two. Over the past 9 months Kenta's skills had improved drastically, and in some ways, Hiruzen was sure Kenta was hiding some of his skills, which he approved of fully. Deception is a shinobi's greatest weapon after all. For the past 9 months they'd nothing but train each day, as Kenta soaked up everything they had to teach him and then some. Guy had returned and working with Kenta had chosen a fighting style for him to learn and was the style that suited him perfectly. It was the perfect combination of speed and strategic targeting that Kenta had excelled at as he learned how to defeat his opponents with ease. Guy had commented that he'd never seen anyone like Kenta pick up a style so quickly and that his flames of youth could one day even rival his own, with a blinding sparkle coming off his teeth when he gave his patented, "nice guy," pose which had inadvertently left Kenta partially blinded for the rest of the week from its brightness. Kenta looked to Anko, his jawline set with a smirk on it, his most prominent feature on display. The scar on his chin only added to his overall badass look, as Anko had commented back when she first saw it. She'd said it made him look much more fearsome, and when he finally became a shinobi he'd likely get more to match it. Kenta couldn't help but smirk as he remembered back when he'd got the scar and the week after that it was healed. Flashback. Kenta was jumping from rooftop to tree branch heading for the clearing with scrolls in his hands. It was the day after Hiruzen had accepted him as his pupil and their lessons officially began tomorrow. But for today he had a promise to keep by meeting with Sayaka to train, which was what the 2 scrolls in his hands were for. Landing in the clearing, Kenta took a quick second to scan the area from left to right and back. He was alone and Sayaka wasn't there yet. Kenta shrugged, before making his way over to one of the trees. Well, might as well get the place ready for some real training then. First things first, a kicking post and sparring ring, Kenta thought as he pulled his sword from his waist and started to make his way over to the tree line. 1 hour later, Sayaka was making her way through the trees with a look of disappointment etched on her face as she headed to the clearing. She knew she was late for her training session with Kenta. She had been looking forward to it all week. Finally she would have someone to help her, and she would have been training already had it not been for her 2-san's attempt to stop her leaving. After the incident last week with the boys, he'd been angry with her for not telling him before and had been close to taking away her 1 day a week off from her studies, or worse, limiting her to only the clan compound. To her that place was like a prison. The majority of the clan followed her 2-san's way of thinking in terms of what a woman's place in shinobi society was. It hadn't been that way under her grandfather, but when her father became clan head after her grandfather's passing, he immediately pulled all Uchiha kunoichi who were married or in a relationship from service and gave the order for their clan's numbers to be increased to make the clan stronger. Sayaka, of course, knew what that had meant. She was extremely mature for her own age, and her Ka-san had told her all about the birds and the bees, along with all that it entailed to prepare her for the life she might one day lead. Her father had begun to looking for a worthy Uchiha to marry her off to when she gets older. When he found one, he'd have her begin a whole other set of lessons about in pleasing her future husband, but that wouldn't be for years, not that she was looking forward to it in the slightest. All the boys in her clan, save for Itachi and Shisui, were just like their 2-sans who respected her 2-sans opinion on women, so she would end up with someone who would treat her like a second-class whore no matter what she did. Shaking her head, she just tried to forget about it all. It was in the future and not a concern right now. Instead, she focused on the training she was going to be doing, thanks to her Ka-san arguing with her 2-san on the topic of her day off and her eldest brother telling her to run while he was distracted, giving her the opening to escape. She knew her 2-san would be angry, but she also knew her Ka-san and Ni-chan could handle him. Her Ka-san hadn't been an elite jonin in her prime for nothing. That had been one of the reasons she had discovered that her 2-san had called for all kunoichi in relationships and marriages to retire, because she'd surpassed him in rank while he was just a jonin. Plus her Ni-chan was an Anbu captain on top of that. she'd found his weasel mask one day along with his captain's band when she went into his room looking for his Pocky stash, so she wasn't worried. As she approached the clearing, she started hearing noises coming from ahead of her, the sound of repeated thumping and grunts of effort. As she got closer, she was able to make out a figure in the area, and she immediately started blushing seeing Kenta ahead of her in the area. He was repeatedly kicking a large portion of a tree trunk that looked to have a large portion of it buried beneath the ground, keeping it in place. But the thing Sayaka was blushing at was the fact that Kenta was training shirtless in only his trousers and boots on. His shirt and flat jacket hanging off his sword just a bit to the left as Kenta swapped from right leg to left as he rotated his kick on the wooden post. He also had black wrappings from his upper forearms down to his hands for their protection. He had obviously been at it a while as his body was glistening with sweat from his exercise, and Sayaka had to stifle back a small moan seeing him. He wasn't a Hulk by any means, but his body was built in a way that showed the results from his training. Not a bit of body fat, all lean muscle from training, with some slight scarring here and there that only added to his overall look. He was fit, very, very fit. Sayaka quickly found herself watching Kenta with some fascination as she remembered her Ka-san's talk about the men and women and couldn't help but let her mind imagine what it would be like. But as soon as she thought it, her face went beet red like a tomato before she shook her head rapidly. No. Bad, Sayaka, bad. Keep those thoughts out. No. You only just met him once, and he, call me, cute, maybe. No bad, Sayaka, no lewd thoughts were too young for that sort of thing. Sayaka raged in her mind as she tried to bring herself back to why she was here. After several moments of steadying her breathing, she continued her way into the clearing but couldn't help but bite the inside of her lip as she continued to look at Kenta's shirtless form. Coming out from the trees, Kenta caught sight of her and smirked seeing her as he stopped kicking and turned to wave. Sayaka returned it but bit down on her lip, nearly making it bleed when she got a full frontal look of Kenta without his shirt and mentally screamed, "Dear Kami, he's gorgeous." As she watched him move for his shirt, frowning slightly as he covered up, but said a silent prayer of thanks when she saw his shirt was practically clinging to him like a second skin. "You're late," Kenta said as he finished pulling on his shirt and turning to Sayaka with a smirk. Sayaka frowned. "Sorry, but my Baka-2-san tried to ground me to the clan compound after last week with those boys. Things have been a bit rocky at home the past week." Kenta nodded in understanding. "It's okay, no harm done. I just took the time to get the place set up for us and get some training in myself," he said, gesturing to look around. Sayaka looked around and she blinked at what she saw. She hadn't really been looking around them before as other things distracted her, but now that she could see he had completely set up a small training area. Several trees had been cut down and there was a 2 kicking posts set up with 10 meters in between them. There were a number of logs tied together and stacked in a pile with multiple targets carved into them for throwing practice, a small sitting area with 2 smaller posts for seats around a series of slightly taller posts bound together as a table, with 2 scrolls sitting on it. She was really impressed he had done all this in an hour by himself. All she could say was, "Wow." Kenta chuckled. "It's not really that much, it's just the start of what we'll need to get to the basics. Come on, I got some things for us to start with. I'm assuming you already know how to use your chakra." Sayaka nodded. "Yeah, Itachi ni-chan showed me how to when I asked him, and he even showed me how to start getting better control of it. But he's been really busy, so he hasn't had time to show me anything else, and anytime he could, Sasuke ni was there, so he didn't want to risk To-san finding out." Kenta scowled hearing that. "Damn, that sucks. Well, don't worry, I'll help you as best I can. I've got scrolls from the library all about chakra control and loads of other things too, so you're in good hands." Sayaka blinked, remembering the meeting a week back about how Kenta had been accused of stealing scrolls from the shinobi library and how the Hokage had dismissed the claims by explaining Kenta's early training for the academy. This would be her chance to finally learn. She wasn't allowed in the Uchiha Jutsu library due to her age, and mostly if her father caught her she'd really be in trouble then with his views. She'd been planning to ask her Ka-san or Itachi to try and get her something, but with this now she didn't have to risk it or risk getting them in trouble for her. Kenta opened the two scrolls and unsealed the contents, one being from his first visit to the library and the second from 2 days prior when he had gone again to do another sweep of the jutsu section just in case he'd find something he'd missed the first time, and boy had he. He'd failed to notice the back section with a couple of sweet jutsu, though he doubted very much that Sayaka would be able to do them with her likely chakra level. Though he did pick up some fire jutsu after reading that's what most Uchiha's prime affinities were, so he thought that would be something she'd like to learn. Plus he was willing to give it a go himself even if he had different affinities. Seeing the large pile of scrolls, Sayaka's eye widened. There were so many. She mentally jumped for joy with excitement looking over each of the scrolls' labels. She was so spoiled for what to start with first. Did she want to start with something small or just go right for something large? She started to think, but then stopped when a light blue-ended scroll caught her eye. It was smaller than the rest and it intrigued her. Reaching out, she took the scroll and opened it. Her eyes immediately widened. It was a scroll for Iryo ninjutsu, medical ninjutsu, and her heart soared to new heights. This was her chance. Kenta saw Sayaka's eyes sparkle slightly with excitement as she opened the Iryo ninjutsu scroll. He recognized it straight off and he smirked. Iryo ninjutsu, interesting choice. I picked it up when I was thinking about learning some to treat some of my smaller wounds from training. You interested in learning some? Sayaka immediately nodded as she kept reading. Absolutely, I've always wanted to learn this. You see, when Sasuke and I were born, he was the strong one, born perfect with no problem. While I was born 4 months later, doctors called it a delayed interval birth, so I was born weaker. The doctors said I had a very slim chance of living past my first week, but it was because of the Iryo ninjutsu specialists that I was saved. My Ka-san always thanks them every time she sees them because without them I wouldn't be here. It's because of that I want to be one too. Not just to help others but to prove my 2-san wrong that I can be strong. Kenta smirked. Well, if that's the road you want to go down, then I'll help you. I was just letting you see what options are available before we began your physical training and started teaching you the basics. That's how my sensei taught me, by starting from the bottom, making sure I was ready. But if you're dead set on Iryo ninjutsu, then I don't see why we couldn't take a look-see and let you have a small look at what it involves. Nodding enthusiastically, Sayaka kept reading the scroll with excitement, looking over just what the jutsu involved. It was listed as a simple healing technique, AC rank medical jutsu for beginners to learn, teaching them how to gather and convert chakra into medical chakra for healing. It was perfect jutsu for her to start with. Sayaka found it somewhat difficult to do at first, but after an hour of reading and practicing the 3 necessary hand signs as well as gathering and converting her chakra, she finally was able to do it as the chakra gathered into a small white orb in her hand, and she looked at it full of pride as she let it fade. Right, time to practice, I suppose, she said as she took the kunai Itachi had given her and was about to cut her hand to practice healing when Kenta grabbed her hand, stopping her. Sayaka looked at him in confusion. What are you doing? I need to practice. Kenta smirked. Then why not use me then? He said before pointing to the healing slash on his chin. No sense in creating new wounds when there's still old ones that need healing. So what do you say? Want to try me as your first patient? Sayaka looked at him with some shock but then smiled. If she was able to heal him, it would make her feel a bit better for him getting hurt while defending her the other week. She nodded. Sure, thanks for this, she said, moving to his side as he tilted his head slightly, letting her get better access to the underside of his chin. Taking a deep breath, Sayaka exhaled as she raised her hands, making the hand signs, rat right pointing arrow, ram right pointing arrow, dog, and started channeling her chakra as she converted it, making the small white orb. She then raised her hands and chakra to the closed over wound and she repeated the scroll's process in her head. Control the chakra, maintain the flow, just a little, not a lot, she said over and over again in her head as she pushed the medical chakra into the wound, remembering what the scroll had said about control and consistency. She had to control the speed of which the charcoal was flowing and maintain it at a slow pace so the wound would heal at a slow constant rate so as not to scar over too fast and it would scar over and she wanted to get it perfect. However, since this is her first time using the jutsu or any jutsu for that matter and she didn't have the best control either, so she put too much into it as the wound closed up fast leaving a rather noticeable jagged scar on his chin. Sayaka cancelled the jutsu and lowered her hands and frowned seeing the scar. She flinched as Kenta pulled a kunai and tilted it to used it as a makeshift mirror to see his chin. She'd expected him to yell at her for not doing it right and leaving him with the scar, so she was shocked when he smirked. Alright, nice scar, this makes me look like a real bad now. Talk about sweet, Kenta said running his finger over his scar smirking. Sayaka frowned, but it wasn't meant to leave a scar, I didn't do it right, she said looking down in failure. Kenta put the kunai away and put his hand on her shoulder, hey enough of that. So what about a little scar, it was your first attempt you can't hope to get it first try. I'm betting not even Tsunade Senju of the Sanin, the creator of Iryo Ninjutsu got it right on the first try. Plus Gigi said this would scar anyway so it's no big deal. He said trying to cheer her up. Sayaka looked at him with a slight smile. Really, I was just trying to help you since you helped me. Are you still okay with this? Kenta smirked. Relax, there's no need to get stressed, I'm just glad I could help. I'm sure you'll get it eventually, it was AC rank jutsu after all. Most academy students don't even learn them until they're genin and neither of us are in the academy yet. All you need is practice and you'll get it down in no time, he said reassuring her as she started to smile again at his kind words. Kenta lifted the scroll and read it before closing it up. Right, I think we should start by making sure you've got the academy basic jutsu down before we go back to any medical jutsu, so that your control will be much better and it will be easier for you when you do learn it. Sayaka nodded hearing his reasoning. Now she had felt stupid expecting to get it right on the first go. It was AC rank after all and she'd seen how hard Sasuke had been practicing the Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu Fire Release, Grand Fireball Jutsu under their two Sans watch at the lake. It was the rite of passage for all Uchiha who would be shinobi, she had wanted to learn it as well but knew her two San would never let her. Sasuke had been practicing it for weeks to get it right and he still got burnt when he used it and it was the same rank as the medical jutsu, she knew it would take time for her to get it right but she wouldn't give up. Looking to Kenta with a newfound passion she smiled, where do we begin? Kenta seeing her passion couldn't help but smirk, well first things first, your physical tour. I mean physical conditioning. He said with a grin that made Sayaka gulp slightly as she remembered him telling her about his sensei being a bit of a sadist and at that moment was slightly worried that it might have rubbed off on him, she was about to find out just how right she was. Flashback end. Coming out of his thoughts Kenta brought up his arm to block a straight right from Anko who was smirking at him. Keep yourself sharp Gaki. Anko chuckled only to gasp as Kenta quickly moved swerving his arm around hers and gripped her forearm and pulled her forward flipping her over him as he swooped under her, using her momentum against her. I'm always sharp Anko, try to remember that. Kenta retorted before he jumped up into the air dodging a low leg sweep from Anko as she righted herself in midair and landed on the ground. Oh I do, but even the sharpest blade can chip. Anko smirked back as she brought her arms together and blocked a high kick that Kenta sent her way mid-jump. The force of it knocked Anko back a bit but using the momentum swung herself around and went to kick Kenta who was still in the air. Kenta saw the kick coming and smirked, she had left herself open. Reacting quickly to the kick Kenta caught it in the air as it brought him to the ground. But he used the chakra in his legs to stop himself while still holding onto Anko's leg before moving faster than the snake charmer could react to and delivered several quick jabs up the inside of Anko's inner left thigh while holding her right leg. The second he did Anko's left knee caved and she dropped to the ground with a thud, motor control in her left leg completely gone leaving her defenseless on the ground as Kenta froze standing over her his fist in position to deliver a final strike with a smirk on his face. Perhaps Anko, but not today. Before Anko could respond, Hiruzen stood up from his seat, clearing his throat. That's enough. Victory goes to Kenta. He called with a pleased smile on his face, seeing his student progress so fast. Hearing his sensei's command, Kenta relaxed his stance and stood normally before delivering a quick series of non-painful jabs to Anko's thigh as it tensed before relaxing again as Anko felt her motor functions return to her. Damn it, Gaki, you got me good that time. Just 9 months with that taijutsu of yours and you're already at the top of your game. Whatever Guy is doing with you during his time is paying off. The now 19-year-old Anko smirked as she got up. Thanks for that, Anko, but we both know that you'd have me beat easily in a real fight when you can use your snakes in conjunction with your taijutsu. I still have a long way to go yet, Kenta said as turned and put his right fist in his left palm and bowed in Hiruzen's direction, getting a raised hand as a gesture to relax from his sensei. Always so humble, Kenta, Hiruzen said as he walked over to the pair. That is a good thing. Arrogance and overconfidence in one's skill can lead to your downfall. However, do not doubt yourself. For someone of your age, defeating a Tokubetsu Jonin like Anko here in a taijutsu-only spar is something to be proud of. Arigato sensei, Kenta said, bowing again, but I would never have become this strong without both yours and Gai-san's assistance and teachings. It is because of you three that I am as strong as I am. Hiruzen shook his head. Our lessons would have meant little to nothing if weren't for your striving, Kenta. It's your will of fire that burns for greatness, my young pupil. Kenta smiled hearing his sensei's praise before bowing once more. Arigato sensei. Hiruzen nodded in response before taking another pull of smoke from his pipe and exhaling. I think that will be enough sparring for today. There is another subject I was hoping to introduce you to in line with your training. Hiruzen said before looking to Anko. Anko, you may return to your duties or take the rest of the day off if you wish. Anko bowed to Hiruzen. Hi, Hokage-sama. She said before looking to Kenta. See ya later, Gaki. She said before disappearing in a shunshin with a knowing smirk. Kenta's eyebrow twitched in annoyance before looking to Hiruzen. You've still got to show me how to do that, he said with a somewhat irritated tone. Anko had been reluctant to teach the shunshin to Kenta due to him being so eager to learn it and used it to taunt him constantly. Hiruzen chuckled. In due time, Kenta, he said before turning and gestured for Kenta to come to him before placing his hand on Kenta's shoulder before the pair disappeared into a shunshin of Hiruzen's own. Scene break. Arriving in the Hokage's office via shunshin, Kenta had to keep himself from falling flat on his face at the sudden chance to his equilibrium. Moving at such speeds was something he'd have to get used to. After getting his footing back, he looked to the sofas at the back of the room to find 6 of his kage bunchins sitting on them patiently with a stack of scrolls to the left of both sofas, showing they were finished reading them. With a nod of his head, Kenta released the jutsu and all 6 bunchins went up in puffs of smoke as Kenta then closed his eyes as he felt the chakra and memories come to him and he filtered through the new information that flooded his brain after the bunchins had taken to reading the scrolls Hiruzen had left for them, which contained the history of the Konoha and that of the shinobi wars and other nations, along with multiple battle strategy guides and methodologies, the beginner's guide to shogi and the complete fundamentals of jutsu and its 3 parts: ninjutsu, genjutsu and taijutsu. Rubbing his head at the sudden influx of information, Kenta groans slightly from the now growing migraine as Hiruzen chuckles as he pours the tea he had brewing, getting Kenta's attention as he smelled the scent. Genmeichatea, it was Kenta's favorite for its almost popcorn-like taste. Handing Kenta the cup, Hiruzen smiled. You've come a long way in such a short time, Kenta, and it's only been a year so far. Your growth sometimes is quite scary when I imagine what strength you will hold when you are older. At this rate you will no doubt surpass myself. Taking a sip of the tea, Kenta smiled. It's all because of the teachings from you, Anko, and Gai Sarutobi sensei. I wouldn't be this strong if it weren't for the 3 of you training me. Hiruzen nodded with a slight smile. You give us too much credit, Kenta, he said before sitting down and gesturing for Kenta to do the same. Tomorrow I intend to start teaching you a new subject of sorts, one that I believe will benefit you greatly and that you should be able to take to with ease. Hiruzen said with a confident smile. With a confident and intrigued look of his own, Kenta grinned at the prospect of learning something new. What will I be studying, Sarutobi-sensei? Hiruzen grinned. Tell me, Kenta, have you ever heard of the term fuinjutsu? Or more specifically, the art of sealing and making seals? Kenta looked at him with some curiosity, remembering what he'd read so far, and slowly nodded. The art that was practiced by the Yondaime Hokage and is practiced by the Gama Sennin Jiraiya, one of your other students and one of the Sannin, who is currently the only seal master in the village. Hiruzen nodded. I see you remember your studies. Hiruzen smirked. Yes, the very same. Although fuinjutsu is much more than just sealing objects away, there is a whole other side to it that the world has forgotten over time due to the lack of those learning it, and because of this most take this forgotten art for granted. Hiruzen finished taking a sip of his tea, which is why I was hoping you would take it and make it part of your arsenal. As my student, I will be able to help you get started. Though I am not a master myself, I do know the art to some extent, and there are detailed scrolls to help you where I cannot. Also, when Jiraiya-kun eventually returns, he will be able to help you progress further. I'm sure he'd love to help his Kahai. Kenta started to think and nodded more and more as a grin grew on his face as Hiruzen kept talking. If it's as powerful as you say it is, Sarutobi-sensei, then I will gladly learn it and become a master like Jiraiya-senpai. Kenta said before chuckling at a thought. If it's as rarely used as you say, I might even consider taking it on as a family secret, and then me and my brother could start our own clan one of these days. Ha ha ha. Kenta said, laughing slightly at the idea. Hiruzen laughed with him at the idea. Yes, wouldn't that be something? He said aloud while thinking. If only you knew your origins, but sadly I can't tell you. Maybe someday though I will, but this is all I can do to set you on the path for now. Scene break. After finishing the tea, Kenta had bid his sensei good evening and left for home to see Naruto. Getting to his apartment, Kenta opened the door and came in yawning after the tiring day. Slipping off his shinobi boots and taking off his flak jacket, he hung it up before making his way into Naruto's apartment via the joining door, walking past 5 other of his bunshins who were sitting meditating on his bed waiting to be dispelled. Opening the door into his brother's apartment, he glanced to the kitchen, seeing the 6th bunshin already cooking their dinner as Naruto lay on his bed with his prank book out as he wrote in it furiously. Kenta chuckled. Evening, Ototo. I see you're hard at work, he said, letting Naruto know he was back. Naruto turned to look at him so fast Kenta was sure he almost snapped his neck. Ni-chan, he called before getting up and rushing over to his older sibling, who held out his arms for the hug he knew was coming as they greeted each other. Because of Kenta's training, he was now a good 3 inches taller in height compared to Naruto, though Naruto was still growing and was eating correctly, which Kenta was making sure of, knowing his Ototo would eat nothing but ramen for breakfast, lunch, dinner and dessert, along with every meal time in between if he didn't. Granted, the same could be said of Kenta when it came to Dango and Paki, mainly thanks to the 2 main women in his life getting him hooked, bringing food to their training sessions. Rustling Naruto's hair, Kenta then looked to his bunshin and nodded as it poofed from existence, making Kenta grin from his new memories of his bunshin's day with Naruto. Kenta laughed slightly. I see we've had fun today, an extra strength stink bomb in the marketplace. Really funny, but you can do better than that, Kenta said as he shook his head at Naruto's antics. His bunshin had helped plant several of the rather foul canisters around the large market area, and then both had hid using the Kakurimino no Jutsu, cloak of invisibility technique, and watched the ensuing chaos as they were set off as people ran from the stench as the area was abandoned for 2 hours until the smell had dissipated. Naruto grinned at his brother's approval. Oh, I know. I've got a bunch of other ideas planned for tomorrow and some really big ones as well that I know you'll love, Naruto said with an excited grin. Kenta laughed and shook his head. I can't wait, just make sure you and my bunshin don't get caught or seen. The last thing I need is Sarutobi-sensei giving me grief for whatever you've got planned, he said with a smirk. Naruto stepped back in mock hurt with a look of vain shock. I'm offended you'd even think such a thing. When do I ever get caught? Naruto stated in mock hurt with pride of his stealth skills, which had only increased in the last 9 months after Kenta had helped him get the Kakurimi no Jutsu, cloak of invisibility technique, down to an art form. He could do as so well. Kenta crossed his arms with a raised eyebrow and smirk. Would you like that list in alphabetical or chronological order? He asked with a growing chuckle as Naruto's head sunk, pride now gone at Kenta, reminding him of the hundreds of times he was caught before learning that technique. I meant in the past 9 months, Ni-chan. Naruto pouted, making Kenta ruffle his hair again in apology. Sorry, Ototo couldn't resist. Why don't you start dishing supper out while I go and deal with my bunchins? Kenta said with a smile. Naruto instantly cheered up. Sure, Ni-chan. You're still going to teach me how to do that bunchin thing, right? Kenta chuckled. Of course, Ototo. What kind of Ni-chan would I be if I didn't help my Ototo? He laughed. But only when we're in the last year of the academy. As much as I'd love to teach it to you now, I don't think the villagers or Sarutobi-sensei would thank me for releasing a horde of pranking blondes on the village. With the chaos just one of you can cause, imagine what 100 of you would be able to do. Kenta explained, only for both him and Naruto to shiver with excitement and slight pity for the villagers in the following months after Naruto learns that jutsu. Kenta turned to go back into his apartment, leaving Naruto chuckling evilly with a wicked look in his eye, already scheming for his future pranking spree. Coming into his room, he looked to his bunchins and sighed before canceling the jutsu, instantly regretting it as he gripped his head in pain. Ow, 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 major headache, Kenta thought as he felt like his head was going to explode. After 3 minutes, Kenta finally felt the pain subside and sighed. Well, that was a pain as always, but at least I got a few jutsu memorized out of it. I'll practice them tomorrow after lessons with sensei, but for now, Kenta thought as he opened his bedside table, taking out a small box and opening it and taking out a chocolate-covered biscuit stick, licking his lips. Ah, Pocky, how I've waited for thee. Scene break. The sun shines in Kenta's bedroom window the next morning just as his alarm goes off. Kenta sits up with a groan and starts to get ready for the day. Getting out of bed, the covers fall over him, showing he was only wearing his loose long-legged pajama bottoms, leaving his chest bare, showing his well-refined form from all his training, with only some light scars on him from when he was just starting training. The most noticeable one being that of a scar on his right shoulder area. It was wider than the others, a stab wound that had healed and was one of the few he didn't get from training. After going through his normal morning routine of getting ready for the day, he finished getting washed and dressed before forming the signature cross hand sign before calling out, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, as 3 bunchins were created in front of him, standing to attention awaiting orders. Looking to the first bunchin, Kenta began to give out their orders for the day. You're on study duty. Create 4 other bunchins once I'm gone, and then pull 4 scrolls each from our last library visit and get to reading. Kenta said before looking to the second bunchin. You are on practical. Go to the practice area and make 6 bunchin each and pick a separate jutsu and have them make 25 bunchins each and get to work practicing the 5 jutsu we memorized yesterday, and have the 6th group practice running through hand signs. I need to be able to do them faster until I have them mastered so I can use jutsu without them. Dispel the 3rd and 2nd sets of bunchins to yourselves every hour and repeat the process until I arrive after lessons with Sarutobi sensei. And then finally the 3rd. You're on Naruto duty, keep him out of trouble and make him his meals. No more than 5 bowls of ramen at lunch. I swear that boy would live off it if he couldn't make sure he eats at least 1 vegetable ramen. Getting 3. Hi. From the bunchins, he dismissed them to start. 1 bunchin going into Naruto's apartment to start breakfast, another going to start on the scrolls, and the 3rd walked out to go to the training field. Kenta was about to leave also when the practical bunchin came back in holding 2 parcels. These were on the doorstep, Taiko, the bunchin said, handing the parcels to him. Looking at them with some curiosity and some scrutiny, not sure if it was safe to open them before he saw to the paper pinned to them. Try to keep warm out there, Gigi. Kenta smirked. Sarutobi sensei. Setting the parcels down on the bed, he opened the one addressed to him and grinned, seeing its contents. A jet black flak jacket like the one he had, but with a black hood and short sleeves with red fur lining around the hood and the sleeves. The back had a red circle with a white swirl in it, like the Chunin and Jonin flak jackets he'd seen. Kenta immediately took off his older flak jacket and pulled on the newer one and zipped it up, pulling the hood over his head, liking the fur lining. Thanks, Gigi. Opening the other package, Kenta cringed slightly as he saw the contents: a neon orange tracksuit with white woolen neck collar and blue detailing, with a similar swirl emblem on the right shoulder. Kenta chuckled. Well, he did say orange was his favorite color. I'm sure he'll love it, although I'm definitely taking him to get a new outfit when we're genin. For a shinobi, this just screams, I'm here, kill me now. Kenta thought as he lay the tracksuit down on the bed with the note and went to walk out, but not before grabbing a box of Pocky for the morning warm-up session. Scene break: Hokage office. Hiruzen was sitting comfortably in his office while 4 Kage Bunshins worked around his desk on the piles of paperwork as the original put his feet up and was giggling slight, reading a little orange book. Feeling the rush of morning air from a newly opened window, Hiruzen closed the book and slipped it back into his robes before looking to the window to see the panting form of Kenta trying to catch his breath. Hiruzen smiled seeing him. Ah, Kenta, how was your morning run? He asked as Kenta sat on the window ledge. Enjoyable, as always. Kenta replied, panting heavily. Please give me a moment, 20 laps of the village can take it out of you. Hiruzen chuckled. You certainly have taken to Guy's workout routine with a passion. Not many can keep up with him. Come sit down and have some tea while you begin this morning lessons, basics of Fuinjutsu, body seals. Taking a final pant, Kenta pushed off the window ledge into the office. I may be able to keep up, but I still say he's insane doing 20 laps on his hands. I stopped after 3 and did the rest on my feet. Kenta said before sitting down and seeing the open scroll on the table, and after reading the first few lines he began growing more and more interested by the second. Seeing the interest in Kenta's eye, Hiruzen chuckled to himself as he poured their tea, hook, line and sinker. 5 hours later, after reading the first scroll 3 times over, Kenta had created 4 more Kage Bunshins, each of which were sitting on the floor reading through other scrolls with notepads beside them as they noted down anything of interest that they found in them, each already with 2 filled pads each behind them stacked in a pile. The original sat between another 4 Bunshins on the other side of the room with an ink brush in hand as he and his doppelgangers practiced calligraphy and had been for the past 4 hours, getting every stroke perfectly in place for when they would begin the physical practice sessions, as his sensei had told him that perfect calligraphy is the first step in becoming a Fuinjutsu master, as it's a major part of the style. It helped that Kenta's handwriting was already near perfect. Standing over the practicing Bunshins and Kenta, Hiruzen nodded seeing their progress as he blew out smoke from his pipe before speaking. That's enough, my boy. Disperse your practicing Bunshins before doing the same with the researching group and we'll see what you've come up with. Kenta nodded before closing his eyes as the 2 groups went up in smoke, making Kenta wince slightly from the hit of information as he began to sort through it, after several moments of which he opened his eyes with a shocked look. That could be useful, he said aloud, remembering one of the ideas his Bunshins had from moments before dispelling. The sudden interest caught Hiruzen's attention. What would that be, my boy? He asked, wondering what had intrigued Kenta so much. Using his Bunshins' memories, Kenta went over to the scrolls and pads and began to look through them to find the passage and notes his Bunshin had made on them before smirking as he found them and laid them out in front of his sensei. Weight, restriction, and gravity seals, or more specifically their uses in training the body's muscles. Looking at the boy in slight shock, Hiruzen then began to browse the very detailed notes the Bunshin had made. Originally, shinobi had used chakra weights to train, though not many used them anymore as they were considered almost to be medieval due to the strain they put on the body. Hiruzen knew of only one shinobi, Guy, who still used them in his training, and the results were nothing to laugh at, and it would appear the weight seals could be used in a similar fashion to the physical weights where chakra was pumped into them to increase the weight. Then there were the gravity and restriction seals. Both were something Hiruzen had never even contemplated on using for training. They had been created solely for the prison system and applied to only the most dangerous of prisoners in order to slow them down and make it impossible for them to even attempt an escape. When activated fully, the prisoner was forced to the ground by the gravity seal, increasing the gravity field around his body, and the restriction seals made it impossible for them to even lift a finger. But on their lower levels, Hiruzen could see the potential Kenta saw in them for advancing his physical training. Nodding as he reviewed the idea, Hiruzen smiled. This is quite an ingenious use you have found for these seals, Kenta. Rather dangerous in some ways, but also very creative. Hiruzen said as he lifted the scroll, making a more detailed examination of the arrays. I assume you want to use this in your physical training from now on. Hiruzen asked, seeing they weren't that complicated that he'd be able to apply them without calling back Jiraiya to do them. Kenta nodded in response. Hi sensei, they'd be a method of continuous training even when I'm not in practice. I'd still be wearing them, and even a short walk would be beneficial with them on. Hiruzen nodded. Very well then, I'll apply them to you. Hiruzen said as he stood up and took out the jar of chakra ink from the box he'd prepared for Kenta's training and popped the top. Remove your top and roll up the bottom of your trouser legs. The weight seals will be on each limb and one on your chest, while the restriction and gravity seals will be on your back. Hiruzen informed him as Kenta followed his sensei's instructions and removed his clothing, rolling up his trouser legs after allowing Hiruzen access to apply the seals. While I am doing this, I want you to begin reciting the key aspects of seals and fuinjutsu, their purposes and uses in a battle. Hiruzen ordered as he started on Kenta's right wrist. 2 hours later, after the long wait, Hiruzen was finally finished applying the seals to Kenta's body. The weight seals were intricate bands around his wrists and ankles, with a small space left between two spiral rings where Hiruzen said a number would appear in regards to how much weight was applied to each, which varied on the amount of chakra put into them. There was a much larger version applied around Kenta's waist area, positioned in a way so as not to interfere with the gravity and restriction seals on his back, both of which were in the shape of multiple-sided shapes, the gravity taking the form of a large hexagonal ring with the number 0 in the center, and the restriction taking the form of an octagonal ring with the same 0 in the center, both number registering what level the seal was set to at that moment. After standing still for so long, Kenta began to flex his shoulders as Hiruzen came around the front of him. They're all finished, they should work without a problem. All you have to do is focus your chakra into your back area and call out your seal and then the level you wish to have the seal set to. Why don't you try it out for now, but don't go beyond level 1 for the moment. I have some idea on how to work with them to get the most out of your training. Kenta nodded as he raised his hands into a ram sign and began to channel chakra into the seals on his back. Gravity and restriction seals, level 1. He spoke and his eyes instantly widened as he felt his body get heavy and he had to put some serious effort into moving. Damn, this stuff really works. Kenta said in a slightly strained voice. Hiruzen nodded. I think it would be best to cancel them for now while we work with your weight seals, Hiruzen informed him. Simply deactivated them as you would any jutsu. Kenta nodded as he channeled chakra again and called out, Kai, as he felt the pressure lifted off him and made it easier to move as he flexed his shoulders from the strain. Hiruzen nodded. Very good, now, the weights will be slightly more tricky, I think. Kenta, I want you to channel the smallest amount of chakra you can into your right wrist seal and then tap the seal with your other hand to activate it. Kenta nodded and looked to his right wrist and he began to channel his chakra as Hiruzen watched him move to tap it, before Kenta regretted doing so as the seal flashed and Kenta found himself being pulled by his wrist and slammed to the ground by the sudden weight increase. Ow, what the hell? Kenta yelled in pain from hitting the ground. Hiruzen stifled a chuckle at his student's mishap before shaking his head. I was afraid of this. It would seem that your extreme chakra reserves are affecting your chakra control greatly and you put too much chakra into the seals and it's affecting just how much weight they act as. Take a look at the number. Kenta looked to the seal on his wrist and his eyes widened, seeing a 5000 lbs in the space. Kenta frowned. Does this mean the weights are useless to me? He asked with some disappointment. Hiruzen shook his head. No, it doesn't. It just means that I will have to apply the chakra to the seal until you have enough control to do it yourself, and it also means you will have to drastically increase your chakra control lessons to this extent. he said as he came over and tapped the seal, releasing the chakra stored in it and channeled his own into them as the 5,000 changed to 15 as Kenta got to his feet once again as Hiruzen went about applying the same 15 to each of Kenta's limbs and then a 40 to his waist. There we go, that should be enough to improve your training for now. Hiruzen said as he went to behind his desk, Kenta, I want you to train with those weights for now only. Once you've trained to the extent you can no longer feel the strain, I want you to activate the first level of your restriction seal and repeat the process as you slowly increase the restriction level each time you no longer feel the weights. Only once you've reached level 5 on the restriction seal will you deactivate before activating the gravity seal's first level, and repeat the restriction seal cycle as you progress up the levels of gravity like you did the restriction seal. Once its level 5 has been reached, you will deactivate the both seals and increase the weights until you can feel the once more, and the process will repeat. This will be how you will train your body from now on. Any questions? Kenta understood the training regimen perfectly. He had similar ideas and understood why Hiruzen didn't want him going beyond level 5, because each time the effects doubled and going beyond level 5 on Ether Seal could affect his growth at his age. Hi Sensei, I understand. And I would like to ask if you knew of any additional chakra control methods I could use to improve my control for the future. Pausing for a moment, Hiruzen stroked his beard as a smile came to him. I think I have just the method that you're looking for, Kenta. He said, getting up and going to the bookshelves again, taking out a scroll that looked like a Iryo ninjutsu scroll. Before handing it to Kenta, this is a method developed years ago for Iryo ninjas, both an advanced level of chakra control and as a way to create large chakra reserve to allow the Iryo nin to treat more injuries, though I know of only one person who still uses it, that person being my second student Tsunade Senju. If you can master this technique, then your chakra control will increase dramatically. Kenta smiled, looking at the scroll, thinking of another that he could help with this scroll. Arigato sensei, this will help a lot. Hiruzen nodded. It's not a problem, Kenta. This is what senseis are for. Now I believe that is enough for today. Go and enjoy the rest of your day. I'm sure you've had your bunchins working overtime while you were here, so you'd better see to them. Kenta chuckled while rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. Hi, arigato sensei. Kenta said before smirking and waved the tiger hand sign before disappearing into a whirlwind of red and black feathers as the window closed behind him as he left. Hiruzen just blinked at his sudden disappearance and then chuckled. So he learned the Shunshin no Jutsu on his own then and even personally modified it. That boy continues to amaze me. He thought to himself before going back to reading a certain little orange book. Scene break. Training Ground 43. Arriving in the training ground via Shunshin, Kenta smirked seeing his bunchins all lying across the area tuckered out from training, completely exhausted. Kenta walked into the area before calling out his command. All right, recall to me in order of creation. He commanded, getting sighs of relief from each bunchin as they dispersed in waves, leaving only himself and the one he had created that morning as it sorted the memories for him before dispersing, giving them and the leftover chakra to him, making Kenta grin. That's definitely a better way of doing things. No headache, he said aloud as he slotted the chakra control scroll into a loop on his flak jacket before looking towards one of the wooden posts that had been created for target practice. Time to test what I've learned, Kenta thought to himself before flashing through a series of hand signs as he sprinted at the middle stump, making a series of hand signs and thought. Sweden. Sushojin, water release. Water palm blade, as he channeled his chakra into his right hand as he began to change the chakra into water and solidify it into a blade shape as he ran before channeling his chakra into his legs, launching himself forward at the target post and with a slash cut the thick post in two with a horizontal slash as he sent the top half into the air as he landed. But not before turning on his heels as he weaved through a set of single hand signs, changing the water blade and made it flow fluidly as Kenta thrust his hand at the top half of the post. Sweden. Subin, water release. Water whip, he called out as the water flowed and lengthened, creating a whip extending from his hand and ensnaring the top half of the post as he whipped it higher into the air before the water fell apart and hit the ground. Taking a deep breath, Kenta continued the attack. Futon. Rinkuden, wind release. Drilling air bullet, he yelled, seeing a compressed blast of air out of his mouth aimed for the wooded half in the air before it hit and slit the log down the middle as it separated into 5 chunks as Kenta flashed through his final series of hand signs. Tiger right pointing arrow, snake right pointing arrow, tiger right pointing arrow, bird right pointing arrow, tiger right pointing arrow, ram right pointing arrow, tiger, and narrowed his eyes on his targets before calling the final attack. Raiden. Sandabaruto, lightning release. Thunderbolt, in an explosion of chakra from Kenta, the air filled with sparks of electricity before Kenta thrust his hand in the direction of the still airborne pieces as an arc of lighting shot from his hand at the wood and hit the first before it jumped from one to the other in a ring of lighting as all 5 burst into flames and turning to ash before they hit the ground. Taking a breath, Kenta lowered his hand, having just run through 4 jutsu, all of which were elemental releases, as he felt the drain on his chakra after the adrenaline started to slow. Now that's more like it, Kenta said aloud, feeling pleased with himself at learning such high-level techniques. This is the kind of power I need to be able to protect my friends and to be worthy of being called student of the Hokage. Kenta thought to himself before looking to the scroll Hiruzen had given him on the advances chakra control technique, but I still have a long way to go, he thought before forming the cross sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he called out as 50 bunshins poofed into existence in front of him. Alright, each of you find a tree or space of water at the river side and start chakra control lessons. I want my control improved ASAP, got it? With a loud yell of, "Hi, Taiko!" from the clones before the divided up into groups for the training, Kenta dropped to a lotus sitting position as he took out the scroll and started reading. Unbeknownst to Kenta, a figure in black with a white mask with the kanji for "nay" was hidden in the shadows of one of the trees, sat watching, recording everything on a scroll for his report back to his master on the Uzumaki's strength. He was about to move closer to see what the scroll was he was starting to read, but froze, sensing something in the area. But before he could react, a ninjutsu was shoved through his chest where his heart would have been, and the figure spluttered blood through the small slot in his white mask before dropping from the trees into the bushes below as a pair of Anbu Shunshine beside him, one with a weasel mask with black hair holding the ninjutsu that had made the kill, evident from the still fresh blood on the blade. The other with a still sheathed katana on her back, wearing a cat mask and had long purple hair. Neko. Report to Hokage-sama of this encounter and inform him I will take the body to T&I. Perhaps Inoichi will be able to get something from this one, the weasel-masked Anbu ordered. The cat Anbu nodded. Hi Taiko, she said before glancing at the dead spy, and then to Kenta, who hadn't noticed them. What do you think they want with Uzumaki-san? I understand Hokage-sama's concerns, but I don't see why that old war hawk would take such an interest this early on. The weasel-masked Anbu shook his head as he lifted the scroll the spy had been documenting and glanced over its contents. It would appear they are doing recon at this point, gauging his strength. It would appear he is a possible target for recruitment that they have an eye on, he said before putting the scroll in a loop for evidence later. Given the strength he just displayed and his age, it's not surprising. He finished lifting the body over his shoulder as they disappeared into Shunshin's. Kenta blinked and looked around for a second before looking in the direction of the trees for a few seconds. I could have sworn I sensed something, Kenta thought before shrugging his shoulders and taking out a pocky stick before going back to reading the scroll. Must have just been my imagination. It was early morning and a now 12-year-old Kenta was sitting at his desk inside his apartment, looking over the uncountable number of papers on his desk, all with detailed notes and diagrams and fuinjutsu arrays. On top of them was an open scroll that Kenta was scanning down, his eyes focused with a purpose. As he read, suddenly the sound of his alarm clock went off, which was sitting on the corner of his desk within arm's reach of Kenta, who continued to read for a few seconds before tapping it to turn the alarm off. Rubbing his eyes wearily, Kenta pushed back from his desk and stood up. He had grown a few more inches in the past year of training, now standing tall at 5 feet 1 inch. He stretches out his arms above his head, yawning, having awoken a few hours earlier and decided to do some work rather than sleep. Closing the scroll and gathering up the papers, he put them into the desk's side drawers, which had an intricate fuinjutsu array on the inside and a second one on the outside, as he closed the drawer and activated the protection and blood seal to keep his notes safe. Turning, he walked a few feet before turning and leaning down to a third array on the floor circling his desk and touched as it activated the security array for his desk. The seals he had applied himself over the year he had been learning fuinjutsu and served to protect his work. He had taken to fuinjutsu with a passion and learned it with ease, and even went as far to teach Naruto how to make storage scrolls and smoke tags for his pranks, since he had decided to give Naruto some light training a few months back. Naruto had been ecstatic that he could begin training, and Kenta had been more than happy to teach his Ododo some things, though Naruto had been less than ecstatic when Kenta began his tour, training by means of dodging Senbon needless while running from his Ni-chan, who seemed to be laughing the whole time. But the training had helped him somewhat, and he'd learned to channel his chakra, which he had in metric shit tons. Kenta had begun his Ododo's chakra control lessons to the extent of leaf balancing and tree walking, though Naruto was struggling with both of them. Kenta refused to teach him any jutsu until he got his chakra control to a respectable level, though that hadn't stopped him progressing in the non-chakra required areas such as taijutsu and shurikenjutsu. Already being semi-dressed in his anbu pants and a somewhat different open-top black shirt, the collar going past his collarbone showing the 5 diamond markings along it, which had been the extent of his advanced chakra training. Flashback 12 months ago. Reading through the scroll, Kenta was interested in what he was seeing. The method required picking an area of the body to focus chakra in and building the chakra up there while compressing it as small as they could through the use of chakra ink to help start the process along. Reading that most performed this technique by storing it behind their foreheads, Kenta, not being one to follow fads, opted for some place different as he took out the ink he had and opened up his flak jacket and applied the mark to his collarbone while he started focusing his chakra. Immediately the mark spread out to be the size of his fist, and Kenta frowned. Looking back to the scroll, Kenta's eyes narrowed reading the notes. While the ink helps seal the chakra there, it is mean for only that purpose and will expand to show the area where the chakra is affecting. The control training comes from focusing the chakra in order to make the mark as small as possible, no larger than half a centimeter. Taking a meditative position, Kenta calmed his mind and focused his chakra as best he could as the mark slowly started to shrink. Flashback end. It would be several more weeks until he got the mark to the required size, and over a period of 5 months he would add 4 more marks, increasing the level of concentration required for channeling the chakra, each reserve being added to over the process of the remaining 5 months of Kenta putting in any leftover chakra at the end of the day from his already huge reserves meant the marks were filling up with abundance. Grabbing the flak jacket he had for over a year, Kenta pulled it on, leaving it open as he buttoned up the shirt to cover over the markings. Looking himself over in the mirror, Kenta smirked as he looked at what 2 years hard training had turned him into. His figure was well toned and evident by looking at his face. No baby fat whatsoever was visible. His face was lean, the look in his eyes was a serious one that still burned with a warm fire. The scar on his chin still prominent, only making him look more hardened and battle-born. Same with his new hairstyle. The sides of his head had been shaven short and the top had been allowed to grow out longer, though it was in a mullet mohawk style, but it was more shaggy and wild. Taking one last glance at himself, he smirked as he grabbed his whip sword and attached it to his waist before moving to the joining door to Naruto's apartment. Knocking on the door, Kenta called out, "Odoto, come on, it's time to get up. First day of the academy and all, don't want to miss out," he said as he started opening the door. "I've still got to go call in with Sarutobi-sensei. He said he wanted so talk to me, so I'll see you there, all right, don't be late," he said, looking around the apartment only to get a grumbled response from the bed as the covers pulled over the blonde's head. "Still tired, Ni-chan?" Naruto grumbled from below the covers. "Why can't the academy start at 10? Kenta's eye twitches slightly. "Because 9 gives us plenty of time to sleep and get ready, so get your butt in gear before I start using my water whip to make you," Kenta threatened as he started going through the hand signs about to make good on his threat. Hearing his older brother's words, Naruto shot out of bed and into the bathroom yelling, "I'm up, Oni-sama, please not again." The water whip had been one of the jutsu Kenta had used on Naruto in training and the blonde hated it. Kenta chuckled seeing Naruto move at a speed that would put most Anbu to shame as he turned and walked back into his own apartment, if only it was that easy to motivate him all the time. Scene break. Hiruzen had just sat back in one of his sofas to enjoy a day of relaxing to rest his bones after a long early morning training session that he'd been doing almost every day as he was slowly getting himself back to his former strength, as three Cage Bunchins worked wearily behind his desk on the paperwork with no complaints. As he was relaxing comfortably, he felt a chakra signature approaching with speed, before the window opened and Kenta appeared in a red feathered shunshin with a smirk on hhis face. "Morning, Sarutobi-sensei," Kenta said with a smirk as he gave a small bow. Smiling back, Hiruzen nodded. "Good morning, Kenta-kun. I trust you're ready for your first day at the academy?" he asked, giving his student a smile. Kenta's grin widened. "Do you really need me to answer that, sensei? I've been ready for the academy for 21 months now, you know that," he said with a huge grin. Hiruzen chuckled. "Yes, I suppose so. I already know you'll be, without a doubt, the strongest in your class. So I trust I don't need to tell you not to be causing trouble," he said, giving Kenta a knowing look, making the redhead rub the back of his head sheepishly. "With your skills, no other student and most likely the majority of the teachers couldn't hold a candle to you." Kenta smirked. "I'd think that would be an understatement, sensei. I believe Anko's words were, I've got enough skill to make a Chunin look like an academy cadet and enough chakra to make every Jonin look like a Gaki crying for its mama's titty milk." Kenta said as he tried his best not to laugh, only to blink, feeling an arm draped across his shoulder and something sharp poke his chin. "Did I hear someone mention me?" came Anko's teasing tone, as she appeared, arm draping across Kenta's shoulder and a kunai at his cheek with a teasing smirk on her face. Kenta smirked. "Welcome back, Anko. I trust your solo mission was enjoyable," he said calmly, as if there wasn't a sharp implement ready to give him a piercing. "Also, please remove the kunai. I'd hate to have to shove mine somewhere again," he said, making Anko's eyes widen as she felt something sharp poke her backside. Anko grinned. "It's getting harder and harder to sneak up on you, Gaki," she said, taking away the kunai and stepped back from him as he did the same. "Like the new hair, by the way, very rugged looking. I wish I could see the Chunin senseis when they realize just how much you could kick their asses." Anko started with a grin, only for Hiruzen to clear his throat, getting both Anko and Kenta to look back to him. Anko rubbed her head sheepishly. "Sorry for the interruption, Hokage-sama," she said with a nervous chuckle. Hiruzen sighed, shaking his head before looking to Kenta again. "I assume you're still planning on hiding your real skills, Kenta, as you planned until you graduate?" Hiruzen asked, giving his student a knowing look. Kenta shrugged. "I might cut loose on my knowledge from time to time and let my taijutsu skills do my talking for me just to get them to realize I know enough, but I won't go overboard," Kenta explained as his eyes narrowed slightly as he started talking strategically. "As for my ninjutsu, I'm keeping them to myself as long as possible. I have already informed Naruto of this, so he will remain quiet, and any offers to graduate early I plan on refusing. Rookie of the Year is still my goal, but I'm sticking with my Ototo, but I'll make sure he'll be capable of looking after himself. I'm not so foolish as to hope we'll be places on the same genin team even with you as my sensei, and I won't ask you to do so. Teams are based on skills and chosen for the good of the village as a whole, so to ask for preferential treatment beyond what I've already been given would be selfish." Hiruzen smiled proudly at his adoptive grandson and student. He'd grown up wise and understood how things worked better than most his age. "I'm glad to hear that, Kenta-kun. Now I plan on helping you with the graduating early part and will keep those at bay who wish to do so with you, as I understand your reasons for doing so. I'm being lenient with you or my students, so just don't go overboard and everything will be fine." Kenta smirked. "Sure thing, sensei. You've got nothing to worry about." Hiruzen smiled back. "Glad to hear it. Now you'd better get going before you're late," he said with a small chuckle. Kenta just shook his head at the Hokage's hidden joke. "Always the joker, sensei. I'll see you both later," he said before disappearing into a whirlwind of crimson feathers. Hiruzen chuckled. "I swear that boy," he finished, shaking his head in amusement. Anko chuckled. That's just the Gaki being a Gaki. No sense in worrying about him, he can take care of himself, she said before giving a bow and disappearing in her own shunshin as Hiruzen sighed. Yes, but that's what worries me, he said before shaking his head and taking out his little orange book to relax. Scene break. Arriving in the shadow of the trees on the academy grounds via a whirlwind shunshin so as not to attract attention, Kenta looked up at the large building before starting to make his way to the main doors in a light jog. Entering the building and following the room numbers and signs, Kenta makes his way to his classroom. He can already hear some commotion from inside. As he rounds the corner to enter the room, he blinks, seeing a crowd of students gathered at the front of the room where the commotion was as Kenta entered from the higher back end of the room, looking down on the scene. Looking down into the crowd, Kenta sighed. Class hasn't even started yet and you're already picking a fight, Kenta thought as he looked at whom the center of attention was. Naruto, dressed in his orange and blue tracksuit, was at odds with another boy. The other boy had black hair and was wearing a blue high-collar shirt and white knee-length shorts and black shinobi sandals, and both he and Naruto were glaring at each other as they butted heads like rams. Shaking his head as he came down the steps to the front, Kenta was debating whether or not to break up the fight, when a girl with bright-colored hair caught his eye. She was wearing a knee-length kipao dress with knee-length black skin-tight shorts and had long bright pink hair that went down to the base of her back. Deciding to find out who the other boy was first, Kenta leant on the desk behind her before speaking. What exactly is going on with those two? Kenta asked in a curious tone, trying to get information. Not looking around, still interested in the fight, the girl spoke. Oh, did you just come in? She asked, not looking still. Yay, I was a bit late in getting up, mind filling me in? Kenta asked, not wanting to give his actual reasoning due to him being the old man's student was still a secret with how people could see it as showing favoritism. Believing his reasoning, the girl continued, here's what happened. We all arrived earlier than we were asked, but when that blonde baka arrived, he was all loud with everyone boasting about how he was going to be the next Hokage to be able to beat his big brother. That's when Sasuke-kun stepped in to put him in his place. The girl finished, swooning slightly, mentioning Sasuke. Kenta blinked for a moment. Sasuke? Could that be? Kenta thought before speaking again. You sound like you know this Sasuke well. So who exactly is he? The girl swooned again. Oh, he's Sasuke Uchiha, the last man of the Uchiha clan. Hearing that confirmed Kenta's suspicions as he looked over the crowd at Sasuke and frowned sadly. I see, so that's Sasuke. So that's him. Kenta began to think as he remembered back several months to the morning after it all happened, the night of the Uchiha massacre. Flashback several months, the morning after Uchiha massacre. Relaxing as he made his way down the streets after his shower after finishing his morning run, Kenta was making his way for his breakfast dango at the bakery, one of the places in town that didn't overcharge him. As he made his way there, Kenta couldn't help but feel something was off about the village that morning, like something bad had happened. But he shook it off and continued to the dango shop, wanting to get one of the first batches of the day. They were always the freshest. He might see Anko there for her morning fix of the good stuff. After a few minutes of walking, he reached the bakery and walked inside, surprised to not see Anko there, but thought she was just running late or maybe already had her fix for the day, and so just continued on to his stool, and was about to call out to place his order when he heard two shinobi in the corner of the restaurant talking. They were chunin, going by their uniforms and age, too young to be jonin and didn't look all that high up. But what they said shook Kenta to his core and made his heart skip a beat. I can't believe Itachi did that. The first chunin spoke, looking a little shaken up. Yay, I know. The second one replied as he shakily lit a cigarette to calm his nerves. Can you imagine doing something like that? He said before taking a drag, wiping out your entire clan in the middle of the night. Yay, I guess you never can tell what some people are. The first began again, but Kenta didn't stop to hear the rest. That was all he needed to hear, before he ran out the door and jumped to the rooftops and took off like a bat out of hell, heading for the Uchiha district as fast as he could. Kami, please, it can't be true. No, it can't. Kenta worried in his mind as he jumped from building to building, almost breaking off tiles with the force of his jumps. He was going so fast. After several minutes that felt like hours of jumping, he was so worried. Kenta finally landed on one of the rooftops just outside the Uchiha district's front gates, and his eyes widened at the scene in front of him. A large crowd had gathered outside the main entrance, which was open wide for all to see, and the sight was enough to make Kenta sick to his stomach. Hundreds of tarpaulins scattered across the streets of the Uchiha compound, each white with some red stain on some part of the cloth from the blood of the fatal injuries. His mouth agape unable to even comprehend what he was seeing, he watched as two shinobi carried another body out onto the streets, tarpaulin covering it. Using his chakra to enhance his senses like he had learned how to do, Kenta was able to make out what they were saying even from that distance away. Another one? How many others are like this one? Asked a chunin walking up to the pair as they set the body down. So far all of them, the first chunin replied, each killed with precision, and then both eyes removed and likely destroyed. Damn bastard, didn't leave us anything, did he? The second chunin said as he lifted up the tarpaulin, and Kenta felt like he was going to be sick seeing what was under it. A boy no older than he was had a throat slit and both his eyes gouged out, leaving bloody crevasses where they had once been. Turning away, Kenta cringed, his body shaking from the fear as his breath was shallow, before he took off with a new destination in mind, a pleading hope in the back of his mind. Please, please be there. Jumping from rooftop to tree branch, he headed for the area they had trained in for so long, fear slowly creeping in on him, as it threatened to destroy him from within. But the second his feet hit the ground of the clearing by the river, his eyes widened as the fear was banished in an instant when he saw her by the riverside. She was curled up, her head between her knees as her arms wrapped around them, clutching them to her stomach, as the sounds of weeping could be heard as her entire body trembled. Realizing what was happening, Kenta moved to go closer, but after a single step, he stopped when her head whipped around from where she was, and the sight made Kenta's heart stop. Her eyes were red from crying, as tears continued to stream down her cheeks, and he could see nothing but desperation in her bloodshot red eyes. Desperation, pleading that the night before hadn't been real. Then a thought crossed his mind. She'd been here all alone since it happened. Scared and frightened, he mentally kicked himself for not being there and moved to her to give his friend some kind of comfort, but before he could even get close, she was on top of him as they both fell backwards, and Kenta hit the ground hard with her clutching to his chest for dear life. Looking at her from his position, Kenta felt his words die in the back of his throat. What could he say? What did anyone say in a situation like this? He felt her tremble on his chest as she clung to him like he was the only thing in the world that was safe, like if she let go she would die. Kenta felt her tears on his neck as she cried into his shoulder. It was then he knew he had to say something. Wrapping his arms around her tightly, he held her close to him. It's all right, I'm here, you're safe now, he said, hoping what even he said gave her some form of comfort. Whatever reason it was, it worked as she burst into wailing sobs as she clung ever tighter to him, crying into his chest and staining his shirt with her tears as she cried out her pain. Kenta just held her and let her get it out. Over the past months of the two of them meeting to train, they had grown close, training and sparring together as Sayaka continued to improve with Kenta's help. She had shown great improvements and through their training had gotten the hang of that C-rank Iryo ninjutsu she'd used in their first session after learning the academy basic jutsu like Kenta had. After the hours of training, the pair of them would have just sat on the water's edge talking. Sayaka had started to confide in him just how bad things had been at home with her two sans lines of thinking, how he would away treat her as less than important being a girl and devoted all his time to the clan, Itachi and Sasuke. While Itachi would distance himself from their two san and would be kind to her and their ka-san. When it came to Sasuke, she would describe him as being proud of the clan and everything they stood for, but at the same time he took on their two sans belief that women were less important than men as far as being a shinobi was concerned. The more worried she got, the more Kenta had cheered her up by telling her about the pranks that Naruto had played that week on the civilians and the trouble they'd get into. Needless to say, the sorrowful conversations were soon filled with laughter at Sayaka imagining the scenes. But Kenta knew a pranking story wasn't going to cut it this time, not with what she'd likely been through. At that moment nothing else mattered because at that moment she needed him more than anything else in the world. In one night her entire world had come crashing down and there were only some fragments left standing. He was one of the biggest ones. Kenta held her close, rubbing her back, not saying a word as he slowly sat up into a kneeling position, holding her gently like he was scared of breaking her. After several moments of moving he'd gotten them both up with Sayaka on his lap clinging to him still as he held her close. After another half an hour of her cries of pain, she started to fall silent. Kenta had thought she'd fallen asleep until she spoke. "Kenta," she said, her voice weak, her throat probably raw from crying so much. Kenta just held her tighter, knowing she was in pain from her voice and that he wanted to let her know she was safe. He killed them all. They're all dead." Sayaka spoke again, her voice trembling and weak on his shoulder. The only reason he could hear her was because she was so close. Her voice was barely even a whisper. "I know," was all Kenta could say. Nothing he said was going to reverse what happened or change things in any way. There were things he wanted to tell her, that everything was going to be okay, that he knew what she was going through, but he knew it was all bullshit. How could anything be okay after what she'd been through? There was no way he knew what she was going through. He and Naruto had always been alone. They had never known their parents, so they had no one to lose but each other. That's why Kenta had always jumped to his brother's aid or defense, because if he ever lost Naruto then he really would be alone. And that thought scared him more than anything. Sure, he'd have Anko, Hiruzen, and Sayaka, but none of them was his family. The bonds he and Naruto shared as brothers were blood, and he never wanted to lose that. Hearing Kenta's words or just losing her strength, Kenta couldn't tell, but Sayaka started crying again, not loudly. This time, her voice was practically non-existent at this point. She just shook in his arms as she cried out her pain, and there was so much of it. Another 2 hours passed and still the pair sat there. Sayaka had long since fallen asleep in Kenta's arms, partly from being worn out by the grief of her loss, but Kenta suspected that it was also due to the fact she hadn't slept all night. The hours he sat there with her allowed Kenta time to think on things. Things that just couldn't add up for him as to why Itachi would do something like this. They'd meet one time when Itachi found them training and Kenta could tell he cared deeply for his Imouto, and from what Sayaka had told him about Itachi he wouldn't do something like this. Especially killing children or their ka-san. Their two-san, from what Sayaka had told him, had always been at odds with Itachi on clan matters, but he didn't think he would have done all this because of that. No, there was something amiss here. Kenta just wasn't seeing the whole picture. There was another reason behind why Itachi had done all of this, and he would find out what that was, if for anything else to give Sayaka the truth she deserved. No sooner had Kenta reached this conclusion than he felt a familiar chakra signature approaching them, only for Hiruzen to appear, via Shunshin, in front of the kneeling Kenta with Sayaka sleeping soundly on his chest. Hiruzen looked down on his young student and the sleeping form of the young girl, and he sighed a breath of relief, having found them after his Anbu had been searching the whole village for the pair. He had suspicions they were friends, and so Kenta was the first person Hiruzen had, though Sayaka would have gone too, but when Hiruzen couldn't find Kenta either, that was when he had left to search personally. However, when Hiruzen arrived in the area he knew something had changed. It was Kenta's eyes. The fire that had burned in them, that normally held passion and warmth, was now a cold flame that threatened to destroy those who would cause pain and suffering to the ones he cared for. Seeing it, Hiruzen flinched slightly. It was the same look that Minato and Kushina had during the war, the look that promised untold pain and suffering to all those who threatened their family, their home, and had been the same ones they had when Uzushiogakure had fallen. They left the village for months as they tore bloody paths through both Iwa and Kumo for their involvements. Hiruzen had hoped never to have seen those eyes again, let alone on someone as young as Kenta. "Sensei." Kenta spoke with a low voice so as not to wake Sayaka, but its fury was felt nonetheless. "Why did this happen?" He finished looking into his sensei's eyes with a righteous fury demanding to be answered. Hearing the tone, Hiruzen felt himself pull back. It was like he was talking to Minato again all those years ago when he told him and Kushina about Uzushiogakure's fall, and to make it worse, it was in the exact same situation. Kushina had clung to Minato in the same way Sayaka was clinging to Kenta now, and that had been when Hiruzen had first seen those exact same eyes demanding answers. But Hiruzen knew he couldn't give them to his young student. The matters behind the Uchiha massacre couldn't be revealed no matter how badly he wanted to. So, stealing his emotions as he had to do so many times as Hokage, he gave his reply, doing his best to make it sound believable. "I don't know, my boy," he said, taking a step towards the pair, "but I promise you I'm going to find out," he said, kneeling down, hoping he had said the right thing, but the look in Kenta's eye that said, "I don't believe you," says otherwise, and it felt like a kick in the teeth for Hiruzen seeing his grandson figure and student in such a way. Hiruzen knew giving the order he had would hurt a lot of people. It had been necessary to keep the village safe, but Kenta had been the last one he had wished to hurt in this way. He just hoped if Kenta eventually did find out the reason, he'd be able to forgive this old man for his stupidity. Letting out a barely audible sigh of regret, Hiruzen looked to Sayaka, who was still clinging to Kenta, and let his gaze soften before he spoke. "I think it would be best if we took this one back to the family she has left, don't you?" Hiruzen asked, hoping to somehow distract Kenta's attention. For the time being, he knew Kenta wouldn't let this go, but perhaps he could put it to the side for now. His words worked as Kenta visibly stiffened at his sensei's words. What? Though Itachi had killed everyone else, Sayaka said that. Kenta began to speak, shock filled his voice. Hiruzen smiled gently and shook his head. "No, my boy, it seems in some act of kindness, he spared his younger siblings and their Ka-san. However, young Sasuke is in a deep genjutsu-induced coma and is not likely to wake for several days yet. While their Ka-san Makoto had been knocked out by a similar genjutsu but is unharmed. She awoke an hour ago, and that was when we began looking for Sayaka here. It was only through my crystal ball that I found you and her here." "Why are you both here exactly?" Hiruzen asked as he took a glance around the small clearing, seeing the wooden logs and sparing area. Looking to Sayaka again, Kenta sighed. "On my one day off a week, I come here to help train Sayaka. Her two-san didn't want her to become a kunoichi because of his biased views on women, but Sayaka just had so much drive for it, I just wanted to help her," he said, looking down at her in his arms, as he brushed her hair back out of her face and behind her ear when he noticed it ticking her. Hiruzen smiled slightly when he noticed some of the warmth coming back into his eyes when he talked about the girl. He could see Kenta really cared for her and in some way felt better about the recent events. Hiruzen had long since known of Fugaku's opinions towards kunoichi and women in general. When the clan head had pulled multiple Uchiha kunoichi from active service, Hiruzen had tried to get him to reconsider, but the stubborn bastard wouldn't have any of it, and to make matters worse, Hiruzen had heard rumors that the man had given the orders for the numbers of the clan to be increased and for the women to do their duty, which had been confirmed by Itachi weeks after, and made Hiruzen consider killing him right then and there. The man had been a pig and a power-hungry bastard with a superiority complex. Hiruzen was grateful that he hadn't discovered Kenta and Sayaka's training. He would have never permitted his daughter to have relations with a boy outside of the clan, let alone the brother of the Kyuubi container. If he had, it would have just been a power play to get the Kyuubi's power for the Uchiha clan. Kneeling down to his student's height, Hiruzen smiled gently. "I see, it's good to see she has someone other than family she can count on," he said, looking to Kenta as slowly the cold fire returned to his eyes, making the fire shadow sigh internally as he placed his hand on Kenta's shoulder. "Come on, her Ka-san is waiting," he said softly before the three of them disappeared in a shunshin.